You have heard of Bigfoot. It could even be said you have seen him. In movies, commercials, and tabloids, that is. Have you ever wondered where it all started? It just so happens Bigfoot has been around for a very long time.
I don't know when the first time I heard about Bigfoots was, but I do remember being very young, probably 4 or 5 years old, and being aware of them because I loved monsters when I was growing up. Godzilla, King Kong, and to me, Bigfoot was just one of those. It wasn't until much later that I realized that these things might actually be real, besides just cool.
My first exposure was when I was a youngster, about 11 years old, in Spokane, Washington. And the kids at school were talking about a film that was being shown that evening in the Spokane Coliseum, and it was none other than Roger Patterson showing his documentary that featured that 60 seconds of film that we know as the the Patterson-Gimlin film. And so I attended that with my dad and younger brother, and the rest is history.
I think the first time I heard of Bigfoot would have been in a book, probably in elementary school. We could order Scholastic Reader books, and I saw one called Strange But True, I think, and it had stories of Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster. I think that was the first time, and then later I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film on television at some point, and those are the things that kind of attracted me at first. And then I saw The Legend of Boggy Creek in a drive-in theater sometime in the 70s, and that really hit it home because I live in Texas, only about 3 hours from southern Arkansas where that occurred. So at that point I was all in.
I first got involved in Sasquatch as a young kid. I was reading the books, watching In Search Of, the John Green and Renee DeHenden books. Kept me going as a young teenager. Whenever I would travel up to Mount St. Helens, I was looking for Bigfoot through that thick brush. Granted, I wasn't really researching, but I had such an interest in it, and it kept me going all the way up to my adult years.
In 1960, I discovered cryptozoology. I decided to get involved in the field, and that's almost 60 years ago.
There was a guy that I went to church with, strangely enough, who ran the sound room with me, and I was a weirdo, and he knew I was a weirdo, so he assumed I was already into Bigfoot, even though I wasn't. So he burned a bunch of documentaries on a DVD and gave it to me. And I started watching the DVD, and it got me interested to know if there were stories kind of local to where I grew up about that subject. So I started kind of going out and talking to people that lived in the community where I grew up, which was a small town called Bolivar in Ohio. And I found out there were all these weird instances of strange deer kills, usually around the same time that people were claiming to see Bigfoot or something like Bigfoot in the woods. Strange screams and stuff like that was happening. They would find a lot of the farmers in the community where I grew up were saying that they were finding these deer ripped in half and stuffed up in trees. So that got me wondering if there was something to it. So that was my baptism into actually going out and talking to witnesses and stuff.
Well, my experiences with Sasquatch in the cryptozoology world really started out with Mothman. My family are from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and so naturally it became something that was really important to me, and I really became passionate about learning about the Mothman. And then through that, I really got interested in other cryptids. And I actually had a sighting when I was younger that I didn't quite understand, and I still don't have an answer for what I saw. So because of all that, I really got into learning about what Bigfoot is.
I heard about Bigfoot long ago when I was a child. It started out as kind of like the boogeyman of the forest, something for parents to keep kids away from going too deep in the woods and all that. But I didn't pay much mind to it. I thought it was really and truly just a scary story that parents told their children, and to kind of keep them at bay and everything. Don't do anything or the boogeyman will come and get you. It wasn't until my senior year in high school I had an encounter with one of these creatures that fully instilled my belief
I've been interested in Bigfoot my whole life since I can remember, like 5 years old. I know when I was in kindergarten, by the time I got out of kindergarten, I got every book in the library, checked out on Bigfoot, which was probably about 4 back then. It was pretty slim pickings back in those days.
When I was wanting to do this, talking about doing this book and thinking about it, I wanted to get a piece of local Native American history. So I went down to Cherokee, North Carolina, and I sat down with the regional chief and some elders, and we basically just had a circle sit down, and I asked them, I said, number one, do you believe in Bigfoot? And they said, we believe that Sasquatch is both flesh and blood creature and spirit animal. That when they die, they become one with the forest and they become the spirit of the wild. But the Cherokee Nation and most Indian tribes believe that the afterlife is how you make it. And animals have their own afterlife. The Cherokee believe that Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the Utnawa, they're a flesh and blood creature just like we are. When they die, their spirit lives in the forest. That's their heaven. They protect the forest. They protect the animals and the people. Years and years ago, most Indian tribes will tell you that Sasquatch and the Native Americans lived side by side. And they traded and they were friends. When the white man came, there's a so-called legend of the Bigfoot Wars and this and that, where Native Americans and Sasquatch fought side by side against white men. Now, the chief down there told me, he said, when he was a kid, he always heard about the forest people, the Utnawa, but he never did put any mind to it. He thought it was a story that you didn't want to be out after dark, you better get back or the Utnawa will get you.
Right.
So when they had this big community garden in Cherokee, and it was like your local grocery store, but you didn't pay. You went out, you paid, but you paid in labor.
Right.
You went out, you worked the garden, and everybody reaped the benefits of the garden.
Right.
So if you needed a few ears of corn for supper or whatever, just go out in the garden and get it.
Yeah.
They said that they started forgetting about the Utnawa and the Sasquatch.
Who started? The Cherokee?
The Cherokee started forgetting about them. And then one day they woke up and their gardens were severely messed up and food taken and this and that. Well, they went on witch hunts thinking that, tribe members had went out and robbed it without telling anybody and been stingy and selfish. And the tribal elders got together and said, we haven't made an offering. We haven't made a trade deal with this group. And they picked fruits and vegetables and what have you, filled baskets full, took it out to the wood line. And the next morning they were gone. And the chief said that, he was just 7 or 8 at the time. He said that whenever he passed on, they would always do this. And one day, him and one of his friends were playing out in the field. And they saw 2 hair-covered, large creatures on 2 feet walk out and get the baskets full of fruit and vegetables and walk back in the woods. 2 days later, the baskets were returned along with roots that they used for medicine that was only found in the tops of these mountains in Cherokee, North Carolina, and berries that was only found in certain areas that they needed for medicine and stuff. And they'd done this for so long until modern times, which we're not, John's 78 years old now, so we're not talking about that long ago.
Right.
But development, land development, this and that, the times of community gardens and friendship and fellowship with the forest people and all this are long gone. So their theory is they retreated back into the woods.
Bigfoot has a common theme throughout Native American lore and culture. What was just told was only a small sample from the Cherokee in North Carolina. Many of the Native American tribes have their own stories concerning Bigfoot, each giving him a name in their own language. Names like Oma from the Hoopa mean boss of the wood. Skookum from the Chinook mean evil god of the woods. The Yakima refer to Stayama, meaning spirit hidden by woods. Even the most commonly known term, Sasquatch, is an adaptation of an Indian name.
Well, the interesting thing about the Native Americans is they knew Bigfoot was here. They had a word in their language. No matter what tribe you're talking about, there was a word there that meant Bigfoot, wild hairy man, wild man of the mountains, or whatever the translation would be. But they were well aware that Bigfoot was there. They believed also that Bigfoot may have had a spirit that allowed them to protect the wilderness or protect the other animals because it was such a large creature. I think that they believed that, and I think that they held those kind of things and passed it down through the family tree. So I think that Bigfoot was something that's been there in Native American history for a long time. So I think that the probability is that that's still going to remain there, and it's part of history.
Bigfoot is bad juju, according to the Salish Indians in British Columbia. The Sasquatch, which is now Sasquatch, the Anglicanized version of Sasquatch, was a frightening, hairy, large, black-haired woman, the Bukwas, that the totem pole is made after, that would steal and take your children and eat them. Okay, that's not your forest friend. That's not your Bigfoot buddy. That's pretty much a frightening monster. A fairy tale that was told. Perhaps it was real. Nonetheless, you have that story, and yet people are still fascinated with Sasquatch. The culture of the mystery, the surrounding myths, they're all involved with Bigfoot. Now, granted, some Native Americans said they traded with the Sasquatch, that they were another tribe, another human tribe. So not every Native American story about Bigfoot is scary. Nonetheless, what is the predominant vibe of Sasquatch? It's frightening. It's a monster.
And Bigfoot is tied around American mythology. In fact, I would almost put a thumbtack and make him the center point of that, and everything spreads out from there in American mythology.
My name is Ivan Marks. The film you're about to see is authentic. It records the last 10 years, which has changed my life. I stumbled on something that I could not believe at first, but soon realized it had significance on me and everyone around me, which could not be ignored or underestimated. The Eskimos call the subject of my story Bushman. The Colville Indians of upstate Washington call him Sasquatch. The Hoopas of Northern California call him Oma. But right now, let's just call him Bigfoot.
Bigfoot lore is not isolated to North America. While tales of strange creatures are common in every culture, many are described as large, hairy, and bipedal, such as the Yeti from the Himalayas, the Yeren from China, or the Yowie from Australia. Dr. David Floyd teaches British literature at Charleston Southern University.
My areas of specialization are cultural history and comparative literature, and that really forms the lens through which I look at the Bigfoot phenomenon, really trying to discern different occurrences of this creature throughout folklore and literature and even architecture, from ancient Greece all the way up to the present day. When I teach literature, I tend to do so considering the historical context that the literature was made in, thinking about the sort of the rhetorical situation of the author, what's going on politically and socially and culturally. And cultural history tends to look at cultures and subcultures and sort of the way they articulate themselves in art and literature and even architecture, and sort of how they talk about their concerns and this type of thing. You have Beowulf, which is one of the more important pieces of literature that we have, one of the earliest written document that we have, where you have this creature Grendel that comes from the marsh, and the text talks about him being covered in scales and living in the marsh, but it's very easy to sort of see a Bigfoot correlation with this creature, or at least the lizard man, something like that. but Grendel comes into the civilized place, Hrothgar's mead hall, and he comes in at night and he assaults and eats the soldiers there. And so he's this monstrous creature that comes from the outer limits and into the civilized space. And this is one of the characteristics of monsters in general, is they tend to invade the domestic space or the social realm. Also around this period you have King Arthur stories come about. And Arthur is another interesting character in that just about every account of Arthur has a story in it about his battle with the giant of Mont Saint-Michel, which is this sometimes hair-covered giant who is known to be cannibalistic. He, like Grendel, he's coming into the village at night and he's eating people and kidnapping people and that type of thing. And Arthur has to go and fight this giant. So when we get to the Renaissance period, which is roughly the 1500s, you have figures like a guy named Aldrovandus who wrote about hairy man creatures in the Canary Islands. You also have a guy named Antonio Pigafetta who sailed with Magellan, who talks about these huge hairy men with giant feet and bull-like voices in Patagonia.
Sometimes primitive man would find his life threatened, terrified by the appearance of a monster from the past.
Bigfoot has been given a new life in American mythology. This evolution began to take shape in the late 1950s and early 1960s. In the summer of 1958, Jerry Crew found a line of very large, human-like footprints near his tractor upon arriving to work at a road construction site near Bluff Creek in California. With the help of a local taxidermist, Jerry made plaster casts of the prints, drawing the interest of a local newspaper. They ran a front-page story complete with pictures. It was with this publication that the term Bigfoot came to be. The Patterson-Gimlin film, the famous first motion picture claiming to document a live Bigfoot, took place in 1967, also in the Bluff Creek area. After this, Bigfoot became a household name, and he began to be featured in movies and creature horror films, such as The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Well, the Boggy Creek story was something that, for me, had a more personal appeal, because when I first started reading about Bigfoot, seeing things on the TV, it was always in the Pacific Northwest, and I grew up in the woods a lot. My father was a bow hunter, and we were often outdoors and in the woods, so I love being in the outdoors, but I never thought that growing up in Texas that there was any possibility I was going to see a Bigfoot. It was just the furthest thing from my mind. And oftentimes we had camped in Arkansas, and so when I saw the Legend of Boggy Creek as a kid, this is alleged to be true encounters with a Sasquatch-like creature in southern Arkansas. So suddenly I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me that a creature like this could exist in my area? Not only is it fitting the profile of a Bigfoot, it's also scary and attacking people. So it had a real great appeal for a kid who loved monsters, and it was closer to my home in Texas. So that really drew me in.
The arrival of the internet allowed a greater exchange of information that began to attract a new community of enthusiasts. The 2011 debut of Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot further catapulted the subject into the minds of this rapidly growing audience.
I'm Cliff Barackman. I'm one of the 4 co-hosts of Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot. I squatch for a living. I'm an independent researcher, and part of my independent research over the last 23, 25 years has been doing a blog on Bigfoot. And really, when Animal Planet decided to do Finding Bigfoot, they put together a show, then they cast some people in it. Initially, from what I understand, I was told they tried to get actors, but it didn't work. So they said, you know what, why don't we just mine the Bigfoot community and see if any of them would work on the show? I was approached, I was asked, would you like to do this sort of thing? I said, yeah, sure, why not? It sounds like fun. And sure enough, it was fun. I am proud to say that Finding Bigfoot has really done a lot to raise the public awareness of Sasquatches and Bigfooting in general. Really, it's a heavy responsibility as far as I'm concerned, because I grew up watching In Search Of and all those television shows and stuff back in the 1970s. And now I realize Finding Bigfoot is the In Search Of the new millennium, and that is a heavy responsibility for me to shoulder.
My name is James Fay, but everyone calls me Bobo. I've been squatching for over 30 years in Northern California. I guess most people know me from Finding Bigfoot, the television show. We've been doing it for almost 7 years now. Well, I lived up in Humboldt, and there were some TV shows coming up that were filmed up there, and people would look around saying, hey, you don't know that lives up there? And people would be like, oh, there's this one guy, Bobo, he's into Bigfoot. And they were doing like Bigfoot documentaries. It was before reality TV happened, it was before the Osbournes and all that. I'm like, this, I know it's not scripted, but like, people would love this stuff, watching us go Bigfooting for real, and we actually get recordings of audio and stuff. They'd love it, like it'd be a hit. And they'd be like, yeah, it sounds good. So I shot a bunch of sizzle reels and stuff like that. People wanted to do pilots, but they wanted to just rip you off and not tell you these huge long contracts with no money. And I'm like, I wouldn't sign anything. So Matt knew Renee because she'd contacted him previously, and I'd met her before the show one time in Washington. She sent us to like the best spot ever. We had multiple sightings. I saw a bunch of eye glow up there, had them stomp around us. I mean, it was Class A sightings in the daylight, and she sent us there. I was like, oh, she was this kind of badass chick. When I met her, she just hiked up out of a canyon carrying like a big 12-volt battery for stunning fish, and like, I was the only guy that made it up and down that canyon out of the Bigfooters that were there that day. Like all these guys, like macho outdoor guys, like it's too rugged, it's too steep. And I went up the whole thing by myself and came up the other side. And I was like, that was gnarly. And then here comes this chick wearing a big backpack carrying a 12-volt like deep cell battery, like which is bigger than a car battery. And I'm like, well, this chick's pretty gnarly. And that's all. A year or two later, he's all, that's the girl I want to get for the female on the show. I'm like, yeah, she was pretty. She looked pretty burly, let's get her. And he just called me and offered me to do TV shows, and one of them was Discovery. They didn't say Animal Planet, it was just Discovery, and they said it'll be one of the channels. And I gave Matt's number, and they found Cliff on the internet. And then Doug from Monster Quest, he had a deal with his channel to develop a show, and he was like, come on, let's do a show. And then, not to be self-aggrandizing or anything, or try to sound big-headed, but Bigfoot's been huge in Finding Bigfoot's been big and getting the whole Bigfoot thing in the forefront of pop culture again. I mean, it was big when I was a little kid in the 70s, like $6 Million Man, In Search Of. Like Bigfoot was big, and then it just kind of went off the radar as far as pop culture went. Then our show definitely brought it back to the forefront.
This spawned involvement such as YouTubers and podcasters sharing personal encounters and civilian researchers going out into the woods to do tree knocks and calls in hopes of being the one to discover Bigfoot.
My name's Tracy Arnold. I'm with the Sasquatch Outlaw YouTube channel, and you can also check out my Facebook page, Tracy Arnold, also the New River Valley Bigfoot organization. I believe that the podcast brings people out to share their experience one-on-one with someone, not really realizing that there's going to be a lot more people than one person seeing it. I believe that gives them the platform to set up on, that they're not in front of public like at a town hall conference or out to a local event, telling their story to a lot of people. It gives them that one-on-one, that one-on-one with me to let their story be known, who they are, and what they believe. I believe that to be the case.
I never thought I would have an opportunity to sit down and literally just sit down with Bob Gimlin and talk about, that entire weekend, that entire time he was out there, which was a fascinating, great story. And with Bob's man, he is my favorite person in the world. I don't mean just Bigfoot related. I mean in the world. I love this guy. I consider him a friend. You know, when we do see each other, you know, it's always a handshake and a hug and say, Bob, how you doing? Hey, Ed, you know, you owe so-and-so. You know, he's just like that, you know, love the guy. But you know, it's funny because when you get to know these people, you realize it's like, man, you know, they're just like us, you know, they're just good people, you know. And when I first interviewed Bob, it was actually kind of a funny story because I approached him and I said, hey Bob, you know, I'd like to have you sometime on the Sit Down with Ed Brown show. And I'm thinking, you know, weeks down the road, whenever, you know, some point. And he goes, how about 45 minutes from now? And I'm like, yeah, that works. You know, so, you know, it was a fly on the fly thing. It was a lot of fun. And no, I didn't think I would ever be sitting at a table with Bob Gimlin in the middle of the woods in the back of an RV, talking about that encounter that happened 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago right now. I mean, it's crazy.
Conventions are a good place to meet the fans of the cryptid world. They come with varied backgrounds and occupations. Expressing a variety of ideology on what Bigfoot is and how to find him.
Dr. Jeff Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University, Pocatello, Idaho. My research involved the evolution of human locomotor systems that are adaptations for walking on two legs. And so in the back of my mind, since I knew of the subject of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, there was interest in that possibility that there could be another bipedal primate still out there to be studied, to be discovered. And in 1996, I was shown a long line of very fresh footprints and had the opportunity to examine those myself firsthand. And that really set the hook, I mean, because here was very persuasive evidence of the existence of something unexplained. And I had the wherewithal, I had the background, the knowledge to evaluate those footprints on their merits, you know, more than your average person would have the ability to, and it made a tremendous impression. I mean, I remember the hair on the back of my neck literally standing up as that realization set in that, my gosh, a Sasquatch actually walked by here last night. The commercialization and use of the image of Bigfoot in popular media and tabloid, it's sort of a two-edged sword. It elevates, without question, the awareness of the topic and its presence, you know, on that public imagination, in the public imagination. But it does have a tendency to trivialize a bit and lessen the seriousness with which it's considered. It's a very challenging undertaking to try to get serious treatment and publication of research on this subject out there, especially within mainstream academia. And so, you know, to that end, for example, I have launched a scholarly peer-reviewed journal, an accredited journal that is open access and you know, is run by a board of editors under my direction, and it provides, in order to provide a venue to give quality research a platform for publication where it is likely not to receive that in the absence of the ultimate conclusive demonstration of the existence of the species. And that's not where the science starts. You know, until we have a more open-minded and receptive attitude from the scientific community, then it's very difficult to engage other scientists in meaningful discussions about the data, the very compelling and suggestive evidence of these things. So recently there was an event that I was invited to participate in at the University of New Mexico at Gallup. The executive director of the campus, Christopher Dyer, who is an anthropologist by training and has a very strong interest in this subject, especially as it relates to the Navajo Nation and their traditional knowledge, their indigenous knowledge. That event was the best attended event on campus in their collective memory. There were hundreds of people who turned out, and a large fraction were from the Navajo Nation, and therefore provided a tremendous opportunity for me to interact with those people and gain better insights into that indigenous perspective. Months later, a ineffectual politician, in order, I'm sure, to simply place himself in the limelight, prompted a disreputable journalist in the region to go after this story, and it's a an old worn out angle or spin on a story. It was very worthwhile, very productive experience for me, and on both fronts. This politician introduced a bill into the New Mexico State Legislature to ban the use of public funds to pursue or attempt to capture Bigfoot, and I can't remember all of the entities he named, but it included things like leprechauns, fairies, and so forth. I mean, that showed the disingenuous motives of the bill. And it was summarily dismissed. It never made it out of committee onto the floor, and was condemned quite vociferously, I understand, by the Secretary of Education as a direct assault on the fundamental principle of academic freedom. You know, one couldn't help, I couldn't help but simply pose the question, how much of the state funds did this politician expend in his office through his personnel and through wasting the committee's time, and would have potentially wasted the entire legislature's time with a frivolous bill like that? Probably far more than was expended for our little field trip into the mountains of northwestern New Mexico. So it polarized opinions, and it did expose this quandary that academicians find themselves in, and administrators of public institutions, educational or other, like fish and game and natural resources and so forth, find themselves in. Oftentimes there are discussions about conspiracies by government agencies to suppress information.
My name is Seth Breedlove, and I'm an independent filmmaker focusing on strange and unusual subjects with my production company, which is called Small Town Monsters. I think the biggest thing about what we do is we want people to take away that obviously we want to be a part of preserving the history of these stories. We're not out to prove anything, so I wouldn't say that we're out here to really prove to people that Bigfoot exists or Mothman exists or anything like that. But we do want people to learn about these stories and to see the historical significance of them as well, because they do have a huge impact on the communities where they take place. And I think for us the biggest thing is that people just learn about the lives of the people that were impacted by these stories. And then also, I guess there is a cool aspect to all of this, to cryptozoology, that a lot of people might not be aware of. So hopefully our movies are opening up audiences to something that they might not have been previously aware of. I mean, within the crypto and paranormal community, they're well received, I think. What's always more interesting to me is how they are received outside of the community. Because I would say more so than people within this community, we're making movies for a general audience, which I don't know that there's anyone else doing that's making independent projects like this within the community. We're trying to draw in Joe Schmo who's sitting on his couch. And I think what I always go back to is my wife's grandpa, George. George is like an avid hunter, spends tons of time out in the woods, and has no interest in all of this. If you directly ask him about Bigfoot, he'll probably laugh at you. But I always think of him when I'm making these movies, because I want to make movies that would appeal to George. So as strange as that sounds, George is kind of like this microcosm for a larger audience, you know, so would George like it? That's what I was thinking. It's hard to make a fool of yourself in this community too. I mean, it's like so many characters are already a part of it that you just become another character in it. The weirdest part about telling these stories for me is, and Alexander, who's making our Champ movie, just told me this. You find yourself becoming a part of the story, like this decades, like in the case of Champ. He just thought it was odd that people were referring to him now as like the Champ guy because he's making this documentary about Champ, and I was like, that's how it is. It was like the first time that really hit me was when we were making Boggy Creek, because there's so many decades of history behind it. And Lyle at one point says in the movie something about he's living the legend now. It's a line in the movie. But when we premiered the film there last November, he said, so you know you're a part of this now, right? And I was like, it is kind of cool, because like I don't think anyone else outside of this, you know, outside of their Bigfoot world would find that cool. But if you're one of us, you kind of get it. You know, like, okay, cool. I'm a part of the Boggy Creek legend now, in some small, minuscule way. I think our audience is too large. That sounds super egotistical, but Mothman had 40,000 views in 1 month, and it's up to like 70 or 80,000. That's not the paranormal community. I'm sorry, it's just not. That is a very broad audience. Our movies are, I would say, just on Amazon, we're up to over 1 million views. That's 1 million people from around the world, literally around the world, watching our stuff. I would say the percentage of our audience that's rooted in cryptozoology or the paranormal has to be 5%, if that. Like, I just don't think that's not to degrade that audience, though, because one thing worth noting is, like, I think that audience, the Bigfoot, the paranormal, they're the ones that support the movies on Kickstarter. So the reason we're able to make the movies is because of the community. But the audience that it's finding is way outside of that. Way outside of that, yeah.
While there may be many points of view expressed by convention goers, all agree that they are part of a growing movement.
Oh, it's definitely ramped up. You know, even in the time that I've been involved, you know, when I first started writing books and you know, just as I started writing, you know, my favorite subject was the legend of Boggy Creek. That was something I couldn't believe nobody had written a book on, the history of that and the making of the movie, because every Bigfooter practically that I met would cite that, the legend of Boggy Creek, as being one of the prime influences for what they did. So early on, you know, as I got, you know, deeper into this culture of Bigfoot and started doing events, they've just grown in proportion. And of course, that was, obviously I was doing this before there was, like, Finding Bigfoot was on the air, and I think that's one of the big things that's brought awareness. You've got some really quality shows. I mean, one of Animal Planet's best shows is Finding Bigfoot. It's about Bigfoot. And you have so many people, you know, standing up saying, I saw something like that. And, you know, it sort of lifted that veil of, you know, you're a crackpot or a weirdo if you saw something like that, making it more culturally acceptable and more, you know, okay to say you've seen something. And I think that brought people always had an interest in this stuff, or the TV shows wouldn't be successful. So now it's almost, you know, acceptable to be into this, and I think that had an influx on these events that were already going on. There was already Bigfoot conferences, but over the last, just even in the last 5 years, it's really ramped up. And I just did a Bigfoot conference in Nebraska, of all places, and even the first year they did that, there was hundreds of people there. I couldn't believe it. So it's just at an all-time peak of interest.
My assessment is there's a difference between how many people are in the field versus the acceptance or non-acceptance of Bigfoot. When I got involved, Ivan Sanderson and I were correspondents, and I was a correspondent of Bernard Heuvelmann's. He said to me once in 1965, there's a handful of people in the country interested in Bigfoot. So it was just a few people were corresponding, talking. It's now thousands, if not millions, around the world are interested in Bigfoot. So the population of interested researchers, academic researchers, has exploded. How do they accept it? Most people accept it in a different way than they did back then. Back then, it was the era of just discovering the giant panda, just discovering all these animals, and there was a feeling that we were right on the edge of discovering Bigfoot. Well, hope fades. People go in and out of the field. There's some people that have been in the field for 5 years and they leave it. There's some people that leave it after 2 years. There's a very few people like me that have been in it for more than 5 decades. So that's a difference that I see. People come and go, they get frustrated, they start picking up on theories about the supernatural, or these creatures have to be fourth dimensional, or dropping them from UFOs. The craziest fringe theories happen in those people that get frustrated and psychologically cannot just keep researching and looking at the data. But then there are those people that have been in the field for more than 20 years. They become more academic, they become more anthropological or zoological, and there's more hope for Bigfoot being discovered because they actually go to school, bring more skills to it, and that's a new part of the field. With the new technology, especially DNA testing, you're getting more of those people involved that used to be skeptical and would not give the time of day to it. So it's changing that way. Does that mean that Bigfoot is any closer to being, verified? Maybe, but it certainly has changed psychologically the way people are looking at it.
I think because of finding Bigfoot being on TV and other shows like, Mountain Monsters, Bigfoot Bounty, Killing Bigfoot, etc., it's exposing Bigfoot to a much bigger, greater audience than ever before. Therefore, you're going to have all different kinds of people coming from different backgrounds in life, coming to conferences like the Ohio Conference, going to film festivals, things of that nature. So it's a big melting pot now. Before, it didn't used to be like that.
If you would have asked me the same question 10 years ago, I would have said nobody in their right mind that doesn't believe in Bigfoot now will ever believe in Bigfoot in 10 years. However, with TV shows and documentaries and movies that are being made, more and more people are not what you would say believers, but they are accepting the possibility that this creature does exist.
By far the largest body of researchers seeking Bigfoot are without scientific credentials. They are known as citizen researchers, weekend warriors, scouting the wilderness in their own backyards. Many are experienced outdoorsmen and women, having invested in an impressive arsenal of equipment such as game cameras, FLIR, night vision, parabolic microphones, and casting plaster. Others embrace a straightforward approach. They simply enjoy the time outdoors, listening for the knocks and looking for tree breaks, maybe even setting out food or objects in an attempt to lure the creature in.
Well, I think that the activities of the Bigfoot community and my activities in the scientific community can be mutually beneficial. I mean, I think my presence in the Bigfoot community at large helps to ground and lend some credibility to those activities. and I make every effort to try to cultivate objectivity and incisiveness and discrimination in the activities of those people involved in this, in an amateur basis. And I use the word amateur carefully because many avocational or non-professional Bigfoot enthusiasts or investigators actually bring remarkable skills to the table. And whether it's experience in the outdoors, in tracking, photography, and electronics, and so forth, those skills can be put to use.
We are the She Squatchers, and we've been searching for Sasquatch for almost a couple years now. We're all paranormal investigators. Most of us are sensitive intuitives. And Loren Coleman actually put the thought in our head that he thought it would be women that would make first contact with Sasquatch. So I called these ladies up and said, girls, we got to get a team going. Let's do this. So that's how She Squatchers was born.
Jerry and I were interviewing him for the show, and that's where he said that he thought if you put some women in the woods without men, dogs, and guns, that you'd get some Bigfoot action going on.
Right.
I jokingly was like, oh, pick me, pick me.
And so I did.
Who thought? Who would have thought?
Well, we're out in the woods a lot. We actually have had many what we call Bigfoot banters around the state of Minnesota, because Minnesota is a hotbed for Sasquatch activity. Talked to many people about their stories, so we kind of get an idea of what areas they're most seen in, and then we go to it. But we also we're all intuitive sensitives as well, so we're hoping that because we feel and we know when ghosts are near and spirits, that this will translate also into Sasquatch, because some of us feel that he is of another dimension, like ghosts, for example. We do a lot of laughing. Yeah, we're kind of the happy team, I think. That's kind of maybe what sets us apart. But I think because we're all women and we're, I don't think they'll be afraid of us, first of all. What's there to be afraid of? But the other thought is that, they think that Sasquatch could be a primate, and we know the best primate researchers have been women. It's Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, and so we hope that, it is said that Bigfoot, well, we know that the great apes don't like the pheromone that men emit. Women don't have that. And of course, we're more nurturing, so we're hoping all that plays a part. You know what? The guys love it. There's something about a bunch of women in the woods without any protection that just really they think is the greatest thing on earth.
Some of them are protective, though. They're like, you need to do something,
like
girls.
We met a couple BFRO members who said, are you packing heat when you go out there? And we said, no. Do you? Well, no, but we think that you should. And we're like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And now am I going to have to worry about you, they say? No,
every time we're going to have to worry every time you guys go out.
But yeah, actually, they love it. Mm-hmm. I mean, we met the Finding Bigfoot guys were in Minnesota last year, and we had just been doing this like 5 months or so. We really hadn't even had a huge expedition. And Matt Moneymaker spent a lot of time with us, and he was just excited, and Renee was excited, and they were like, "This is great." And Renee said, "You guys are going to be the ones," And this is what it's very interesting, the reactions we get, and people just bring us right in. I mean, big hunters and stuff like up northern Minnesota, they bring their pictures, they tell us their stories. It's phenomenal. It's wide, but you're right, it's very male dominated.
The amateur researchers are absolutely critical because they're the only ones that get evidence. The scientists don't get jack. Like Meldrum cast the Blue Mountain prints, but other than that, and Bindernall got that great cast up in BC, but besides that, everything's got by amateurs. And it's not the scientists' fault. There's only a couple of them that get no money for it. So, I mean, they're teaching and doing day jobs. They don't have time to go. I mean, there's thousands of us and like a half dozen of them.
You can't argue science, So like all these people that call themselves armchair researchers, I love it. Get out there, get DNA, go and enjoy yourself, enjoy the outdoors. But you can't argue science. So if they go out and they find something, well, have it tested. Have the DNA tested, and hopefully one of us, whether it's an armchair researcher or someone who spends every weekend in the woods, will get some kind of DNA to prove this thing's real. So we all get the same chance, whether it's a guy that just comes off his couch and goes into the woods, or myself. We have the same chance of proving this thing is either real or fake.
So when I was cast on that reality show, Bigfoot Bounty by Spike TV, I had saved my Bigfoot camping experience for the show. So as I was on the show, I was actually Bigfooting for the first time on national television. Kind of weird. Don't mess up. You know, what's poison ivy? What's, poison oak? I don't want to find out the hard way with the camera on me. So I had to like seriously look into it. And then after the show was over, I was actually able to go out in the field, do research with other researchers, and focus on the subject of Sasquatch. Is that a bear print? Is that a human footprint? What kind of a footprint is that? Without worrying about the camera crew and the producers saying, okay, we got to go in now. You could be out all night long looking for Bigfoot and researching. When you're on a TV show, you can't do that. You're only given a certain 3 or 4 hours, and that's it. So my Bigfooting camping research experience exploded after the show. So that was a wonderful stepping stone, and at least that pointed me in the right direction.
My name is Sam DeLoach, and I am a head researcher in the High Knob, Virginia area for the Mountain Empire Cryptid Research Organization. What motivated me to get into the field were people like Dr. Jeff Meldrum that were scientists at Idaho State University, an anthropologist and anatomist. People like that are taking a serious look at there's a possibility that this creature could exist in the forests of North America. So that got my interest piqued as far as, hey, this creature could very much possibly exist if a scientist, a very well-credited scientist, thinks that it might exist as well. So therefore, I started doing a lot of research on High Knob, Virginia, and getting to know more people within our region and making great contacts and coming up with a great research group. So the research that I do, like I said, is mainly in High Knob, Virginia. And of course, there was a Finding Bigfoot episode that was filmed there. And so I do a lot of my research in that area. It's basic research. I don't use any type of cameras, any forward-looking infrared radar, any drones or anything like that. I am a basic researcher that just goes out with a backpack, some water, a phone, and a camera, and see what I can find that might be out of place. Now, I'll tell you this, a lot of the things that I do find can be explained. So I tend to look at everything and that it possibly might be and then rule it out. Some say the Bigfoots can sense cameras. I'm not on the technical side of it. I kind of do my own thing and figure something out that somebody else is not doing. I always tell people when I talk to them, think outside of the box. Now, I think there's a limit to that as far as thinking and what people think and all that. But, you got to keep an open mind on how you go about researching it. Because if these creatures are somewhat intelligent, then, they could be standing around here looking at us and we don't even know it. You know what I'm saying? So, I think it's flesh, blood, and animal. I don't think it's a human hybrid. I don't. I just think it's a species of its own. Maybe a descendant of a creature that we know exists, Gigantopithecus or Giganto. Probably the closest thing that it resembles. Height, look, from what people say, it looks very human.
We all know that eventually academics will be involved in the search for Sasquatch, but at this point there are so few that are able to do it for tenure and political reasons. So essentially we have an amateur army of researchers out there, and for the most part it's kind of a wash. There's some people out there doing a really good job collecting data and documenting it, and then there's some people out there doing a really poor job, not producing anything but hullabaloo. Just like, look at me, give me attention, and that sort of thing. Making loud, ridiculous claims of various sorts. So I kind of think it's a wash. The good evidence that's out there has almost exclusively been collected by amateurs, but at the same time there's another whole group of amateurs doing damage to the subject. So good, bad, kind of meets in the middle.
Even towns have caught Bigfoot fever. Norton is a small coal mining town in the mountains of southwest Virginia. Coal production has declined considerably in recent years, leaving city officials looking for a new way to resurrect the economy of this isolated town. The wood booger, as Bigfoot is locally called, may be just what they are looking for.
The city of Norton is in the middle of the Appalachian coal fields, and one of the things that we're in the process of doing is transitioning our economy from the coal economy to outdoor adventure and outdoor tourism adventure. And our hope is that by incorporating the wood booger, the legend and the folklore of the wood booger into our area, that it will draw people from outside the area to come and visit with us and to explore our mountains, our trails, hike them, bike them, do kayaking, all in the light of the wood booger, looking for him if that's what they want to do, or just enjoying the culture that is around the wood booger, the food, the festivals, etc. We really hope to draw as many people in as we can.
The Tourism Committee recognized how significantly important that this was going to be for tourism for Southwest Virginia and for the city of Norton. And we wanted to recognize this folklore, and we wanted to actually put a statue up at Flag Rock so where visitors could come into the city, go up, hang out with the wood booger, find out a little bit more about the history of the wood booger and how Norton is really trying to promote the wood booger theme.
Norton decided to do a Sasquatch resolution declaring the city of Norton a Sasquatch sanctuary when the Finding Bigfoot program released its show describing Norton as a Bigfoot area. And so the city council decided that it would be prudent that we wouldn't have any hunters looking for Bigfoot. So we decided to do a sanctuary area, again in hopes of preserving the animal if it exists, and also bringing people to our area who are interested in trying to find the animal.
When Finding Bigfoot first aired and I presented this idea to the city council, I wanted to do some research so I could give them some information as far as what was going on elsewhere in other areas. So I found out that there was a 450 square mile Yeti sanctuary in India, there's a wood booger sanctuary in Indiana, and there's one also in Washington State. And I felt that it was very, very important for us to promote the wood booger here in Southwest Virginia, and basically the home of the wood booger on High Knob in Norton, Virginia.
I would say in the summer of 2014, the city realized that the local business here in Norton, the Home Hardware, was selling wood booger t-shirts, and it was a big part of their income. So we decided to capitalize on it, and starting in June of 2014, we organized and put on the first Wood Booger Festival in October of that year. With the annual Wood Booger Fest, we are also having other activities that are popping up. We recently had a Wood Booger Chase, which was a triathlon of kayak, run, and bicycling here on the mountain. Our whole premise of this is to get people to the city of Norton to stay in our hotels, to eat in our restaurants, and bring their money to this area. And we are very close to a big market in this area. I think it is one part of the eco-tourism travel destination, the Flag Rock Park, what we have to offer here in the park with the wood booger and the history of him. Like I say, our annual festivals and our local wood booger chase that happened here this past weekend is very well attended. People are embracing this. They want something to attend. They want something locally that they can attend, and the word is getting out, and they're telling their friends, and their friends are coming in from other states. Our local Wood Booger Festival last year, we have a family from Canada that comes in and helps work this every year. So yes, the word is getting out.
In the city of Norton, there are three basic hot spots for finding the wood booger or something related to the wood booger. First, of course, is our Flag Rock Recreation Area. That's the heart of our Sasquatch Sanctuary area. There's a 6 foot tall, 2,000 pound Sasquatch sitting up there waiting to greet you. The second would be the Good Old Boys Hardware Store, where Mike and Pickle and Big O will greet you in the store, and the first thing you'll see is a big wooden wood booger. And so I would definitely say you need to go by and visit them. They know all the lore and they know all the locations there. The third, of course, is the Wood Booger Grill, where you can get great food, talk about the wood booger, have some communications with the locals about the wood booger, and just have some great victuals.
The media most often represents Bigfoot as humor or fantasy. This creates an obstacle of credibility for those dedicated to the task of bringing scientific involvement to the subject. But Bigfoot will be relegated to entertainment use until there is a specimen made available for study, even for those who have seen the evidence needed to convince them of his existence.
First of all, I always am very careful with the use of the word belief. Belief to me, in my own personal philosophy, is I do not believe in Bigfoot. Belief is about the providence of religion. It's faith-based. People give up a lot of their scientific method, their insights, their investigative skills when they go into a field like Bigfoot studies and say, I believe in Bigfoot. That gives them no sort of yardstick for what they're going to measure. They hear a noise in the woods, they believe it's Bigfoot. They hear a knock on a tree, they believe it's Bigfoot. I want to see the evidence. I want to look at each case by case.
Let's be honest. Bigfoot is entertainment, regardless. YouTube, movies, Harry and the Hendersons, for example, TV shows, Finding Bigfoot, it's entertainment. The general audience, the bigger picture of people, I think would like to think it's real because humans, we are naturally romantic. Dr. Jane Goodall is extremely hopeful that Bigfoot's real. There's no proof. She thinks it could be, but we still don't have any evidence. I think the general population sides with Dr. Goodall and that it'd be great if it was real. But it's probably not real because people always today say, well, we have all this technology. How come we haven't found a body? That's like the number one thing that's thrown at us Bigfooters. Where's the body? Where are the bones? Now, granted, we keep saying, oh, the forest dissolves the bones and porcupines eat the bones. And yes, there is some truth to that. However, as many times I've been in the woods, I've never found a bear carcass. I know there's bears out there. I've seen them. I've heard them. I've found their footprints. Yet, I have never found bear bones. You know, the bones I've found were either deer or elk. Well, let's look at the population of deer and elk. There's thousands of them in a certain amount of area. Bigfoot, if it's real, the population has to be like this big. It has to be. Now, according to all these people at the conference, I've seen Bigfoot in my backyard. Well, I just heard there was a Bigfoot down the street here at Salt Fork around the tent to the left. Really? 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 Bigfoot is as common as a squirrel in a state park? I don't think so. Okay, because that would be on the news.
I think the people that take the time and effort to come to these type conferences, I think the vast majority of those definitely believe the creature exists, that there is a definite possibility there is, and many of these people have had encounters themselves, you know, ranging from, you know, vague encounters to face-to-face visual sightings. So I think when you're talking about this environment, definitely most people are quote-unquote believers. And in general, beyond that, you have an audience, the TV audience, for example. You know, a great number of those, I think, is in it for the entertainment. But, you know, their uncle or somebody, there's always a story that they may admit to that really kind of fuels that interest, and they may not admit it to their coworkers, but I think inside they're like, yeah, it would be very cool if Bigfoot does exist, you know.
I think it's more entertainment. I mean, you have to realize that you're not going to see, when you turn on the show, the TV show, you're not going to actually see footage of Bigfoot. Something new. You'll see history related, the Patterson-Gimlin film and the Freeman film and some of the other films that are out there, but you're not going to see something new because obviously it would be headline news. If it was, it wouldn't be on the TV program. So you know going into watching the program that you're not going to see something new. You may see some techniques on research, or some techniques that they're trying to do by call blasting and some other things that are interesting aspects of the research process, but to actually think that you're going to be able to see Bigfoot or something is, you know, is more for entertainment, I think. So.
Oh, pop culture definitely hurts the whole Bigfoot research movement because it's just, people look at Weekly World News, National Enquirer, and it's this singular individual they always promote, like he was seen. It's always, to most people, they're surprised when you say, no, it's not he, it's they. You know, it's just, and just kind of making it a joke and like, you know, like puff pieces like, oh, it's a slow news cycle, put in this fake Bigfoot story and laugh at the end and make fun of it, you know, and you know, the jokes by the comedians. Like our show got heckled. Like we were like, all the late night shows made fun of us and heckled us, and we were the butt of jokes, whatever. But 75% of the people that watched our show didn't believe in Bigfoot and just watched for the character. Like almost 80% actually, and 2/3 didn't believe in Bigfoot. But by the end of our run now, it's like 2/3 believe in Bigfoot that watch our show. So we've, you know, it's mostly because of the witnesses that they've switched over. I mean, serious Bigfooters hate our show a lot of times, you know, they hate it, just knock it, and so do I. I mean, no one hated it more than me until just recently, and Cliff hated it too. I mean, we couldn't stand it. But on the plus side, I mean, and even Bindernagel, Meldrum, them guys, they acknowledge, go, hey, we're glad. Like they didn't like the show at first because of the, you know, cheesiness factor, but they're like, hey, it's great because it's opened up the dialogue, and there's way more reports, and people are more, you know, and people are open to the subject and talk about it, because not that we've convinced people, are like Matt, Cliff, myself, and Renee, like we're not convinced people, but when people see the witnesses doing their interviews, that's what convinces people. Like they see we got hundreds and hundreds of witnesses on, you know, and most of them are telling the truth, you know, compelling stories.
I think most people follow Sasquatch things because they want them to exist. I do find that most people haven't really delved in super deep, so they still have a question about whether they are real or are not real. So I think they're just hoping to be real. I mean, Jane Goodall is a good example. She says that she's sure they're real, or at least she hopes they're real. She thinks they're real because of the people that she's spoken to personally that said that they've seen them, and she's smart enough to identify that they're not lying, right? But I think most people hope they're real, kind of like Jane does. I mean, we all hope they're real, just some of us know.
Now, I understand with more people being involved with Bigfoot and considering it and interest in stuff, it actually has made the possibility of various segments of the field. There's a strong academic, scientific part of the field, but there's a lot of people that like the humor part of Bigfoot. And the one that I think I've seen grow the most is what I call crypto-tourism. Now, back in the 60s, we started getting into a field called crypto-tourism, where people would go out on nature hikes with the kind of the underlying theme that I want to save the woods, I want to, you know, do something good, but I also like to do exercise, I like to be outside. So put Bigfoot on top of that. You now have social interactions, you have camping trips, you have conferences. Even part of this conference is an expedition. So you have those overlays with Bigfoot, and so people who are doing things that they used to do in the past that was just hiking or walking outside are now being labeled Bigfoot expeditions, and that's fine, but for me, I understand it's just a use of that word, and it hasn't become yet an abuse, but what I am seeing is that there are some very scrupulous or unscrupulous people. There are some very unscrupulous people that are taking advantage of Bigfoot to make money, to say that they're on expeditions when they're actually doing camping trips in a natural forest or a national forest, and they're going out, parts of their crew, knocking on the woods, you know, knocking with wood on trees and stuff so that they get people to come back on their $300 expeditions. So we have to be careful. For every good side of a field, you've got to look for the dark side. And people are exploiting other individuals. A lot of people are in this field just to make money, you know, to sell trinkets, to sell bumper stickers, things like that. They're not really for serious study. As long as people can go with their eyes open and, you know, still be entertained and still laugh about it, but they, you know, the money's flying out of their pocket, and they can live with that, it's just becoming part of our culture. It's not like it's the Bigfoot field, it's becoming part of capitalism and commercialism.
Skepticism remains the attitude of the public at large. Who can blame them? Conclusive evidence is scarce, and much of what has been produced was later determined to have been hoaxed. This reflects poorly on the community of believers, leaving them vulnerable to negative stereotyping.
I think that the public still feels that without an actual or good photograph or a number of good photographs, or the actual body of a Bigfoot, they feel like that there's still a gap there. There's still something missing, and and it comes back to the outer space technology the same way. There's certain things that the people talk about, but yet, a black hole is one thing to be able to talk about, but it's like, what do you have for a physical piece of proof about that? There's nothing about that. So, that I think the two kind of go hand in hand.
I hate to stereotype Bigfooters, but for the longest time, I thought Bigfooters were uneducated. They had a 6th grade education. They're homophobic, racist, ignorant, sexist, backwoods hillbillies. Now, granted, there is that stereotype. Of course, there are some stereotypes that are true. However, what has surprised me with Bigfoot culture is you're having people with different income and different degrees and ways in life that come to these conferences. It's very surprising for me. For example, Sasquatch Chronicles, Wes Germer puts on that iTunes podcast. His demographic aren't Bigfooters. They're upper middle class people with incomes up to $100,000.
Well, because I've been involved in the field for so long, I actually have seen the ups and downs in that. In one of my books, The Bigfoot, The True Story of Apes in America, I really look at how there's this history in documentaries and fiction films where Bigfoot's become acceptable. Films like The Legend of Boggy Creek really promoted that was a physical creature, there was real stories, and there was a good time of interaction between researchers and the movies, and then also documentary reality TV. Then in 1986, along came Harry and the Hendersons, and it became comical. It became an era of the kids that were 10 to 12 years old then, coming out of that era, have a much more skeptical look at Bigfoot. They can accept that it's a subject that's real in terms of sociology, but not zoologically. So now we're, coming out of the Finding Bigfoot era. 10 years of reality TV, of people going out there and not finding Bigfoot, sometimes being comical about it, sometimes being realistic. And so there's a whole groundswell of reality, of people that are based in facts and data. And I'm waiting now for the next one. But it comes in waves. It's not, it's not sort of evolution of, well, they thought the Bigfoot was real and then they made it comical and it's getting more comical. It's been up and down and those kinds of feelings.
Bigfoot will most certainly remain popular in spite of his elusive nature. The very mystery surrounding him is what fuels the fascination. Maybe it's better that way. Legends are a fundamental part of humanity. They ignite the spirit of discovery and wonder, thus assuring cryptids as a subject of interest even if verification is a long time coming.
Well, I think it's twofold as to what Bigfoot attracts people. First, that it's a plausible creature. There's a lot of cryptozoology creatures that, run the gamut, but Bigfoot, is something that people can imagine, that could happen. I mean, it's not too far out of the realm for this undiscovered primate of some sort to be living out there. Also, I think the appeal is that it has human-like features, and that's something that both intrigues us and almost terrifies us at the same time, because when you see a creature like this, it's standing on two legs, you look at it and some of the witnesses say, it just looks so human. I looked at its eyes. That's kind of spooky, because you say, what intelligence does this creature have? How smart is it? It's so human-like. So I think we're fascinated that there could be something else out there that walks upright, that could have some greater intelligence beyond your average animal. And that's just, part of the mystery, and it just fuels everything.
I think the fascination of Bigfoot really started out with our evolution from being Neanderthal to the time where we are now, as modern humans. And you look back a few hundred years ago, people were really scared of the woods in North America. They claimed that there were giant beasts out in the woods. And so I kind of think that through our history, we've kind of just instilled that in ourselves, that there's something out there in the woods. And so personally, I think there is something out there in the woods.
And a lot of people want to find Bigfoot because they think they're going to be rich. The TV show I was on, the $10 million Bigfoot bounty. If I had proven Bigfoot's real, I would have won $10 million. What's our driving force as human beings? Money. Bigfoot is big business. Let's be realistic. You have people who have their own different agendas, selling books, making YouTube videos, speaking at conferences, doing TV shows. So Bigfoot's money. That's the bottom dollar. So the fascination for Sasquatch with some people is money, and it's also the great mystery.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what they lure about Bigfoot is just the pure mystery of it, and the fact that I think it's embedded in our psyche because we evolved next to these things for millennia. And every culture has a boogeyman, like big, hairy, scary man, at night. Like every culture has stories about, don't go out at night alone, little kids, and around the world people say don't whistle at night, that kind of stuff. And
I think one of the reasons that people are so fascinated by Sasquatches, or in fact any of the hairy hominoids that might roam the planet, is that it's kind of a reflection of ourselves in a way, a reflection of something that perhaps we've lost because we've essentially domesticated ourselves, but yet somehow these things are still out there living free like we once were.
Until Bigfoot is revealed to the world, his face can be seen in the men and women representing his culture. These are the faces of Bigfoot.
When you're out there looking for Bigfoot, you need to be happy with whatever you find. You cannot go out into the woods with confirmation biasness. You're shooting yourself in the foot. That's not being scientific. So, search for the answers and be happy with whatever you find. Very important. And I think people forget that.
For myself, at the end of the day, I don't care why these people get into the woods. I just want them to get into the woods and get away from PlayStation, get away from these other electronic devices, and go out and play in the woods. And that's important. And I really like to see that happen, I guess.
It's also kind of, I think it keeps things wild. It keeps, even though there might not be, there's a lot of areas you go down in the south. There's no wolves or mountain lions or bears left anymore, but there's still Bigfoot sightings, and it kind of adds that mystique to the like that whole American Wild West wilderness kind of aspect of it. It's part of our heritage. It still lives in the Squatch.
Bigfoot is everywhere nowadays. It's on TV, it's in the movies, it's in books, and people love Sasquatches because of that, the pop culture aspect of it. And I think that's wonderful. Because check this out. Bigfoots are in fact real. They will be discovered academically eventually. Right now they don't need our protection, but after they're discovered, they're gonna need protection from us because we have like the Midas touch, but instead of everything turning to gold, everything human beings touch turns to crap. And I don't want that to happen to Bigfoots. But because they have all these people who enjoy this subject already, they essentially have an army, like this support army, that's gonna be behind them. So after the academics catch up to us and realize Sasquatches are real, they're gonna have an army of weirdos advocating for the protection of them and the environment they live in, and that's gonna help.
I really think, and this goes across paranormal, cryptids, all that, I think the world is a crappy place. And I think there's something very appealing about going out in the woods and trying to look for a creature that everyone else says might not exist. I think there's something very innocent about going out and trying to discover something for yourself. And the world's full of lies, and the media's full of lies and all that kind of stuff now. And so to try to disprove or prove an unknown species, there's something very, very appealing like that, about that, in a world where North Korea is threatening to nuke us, and there's hurricanes battering our coasts and all that kind of stuff. And I think that runs the gamut of all paranormal, ghosts, and all that kind of stuff. I just think there's something very innocent about all of this. And it goes back to like the idea of like when I was a kid, I would go out in the woods and just play in the forest. My parents had a woods behind their house. I'd go out there and I'd play from morning until night, during the summer especially. And this just really reminds me of that. I'm making a short film called The Man in the Woods that kind of goes back to that idea. Like, I think at the end of the day, most of these people are just kids in the woods.